The assembly line. The assembly line represents one of the most profound transformations in human production. Before its introduction, manufacturing relied heavily on skilled craftsmen who built products from start to finish. This process was slow, expensive, and limited in scale. Each item carried the mark of individual labor, but efficiency remained constrained by time and human endurance. The core idea of the assembly line was deceptively simple. Instead of one worker assembling an entire product, the product itself would move through a sequence of stations, with each worker performing a single, specialized task. This reorganization of labor reduced complexity, minimized wasted movement, and introduced a predictable rhythm to production. Time became measurable, repeatable, and optimizable. While early forms of assembly-based work existed before, the system reached its defining form in the early 20th century, particularly in industrial manufacturing. Mechanization and conveyor belts synchronized human labor with machines, creating a continuous flow of production. Tasks were standardized, tools were optimized for specific motions, and output increased dramatically. The consequences were immediate and far-reaching. Production costs dropped sharply, making goods that were once considered luxuries accessible to the average consumer. Manufacturing speed increased to levels previously unimaginable. Products became uniform, interchangeable, and reliable, establishing the foundations of mass consumption. However, the assembly line did more than change factories. It reshaped the relationship between humans and work itself. Labor became fragmented, repetitive, and tightly regulated by time. Productivity was no longer measured by craftsmanship but by output per hour. This shift altered how workers experienced their jobs and how societies organized employment. At the same time, higher efficiency allowed industries to pay wages that supported a growing middle class. Stable incomes enabled new patterns of living, consumption, and urban growth. Entire cities reorganized around industrial schedules, transportation networks, and factory systems. The influence of the assembly line extended far beyond manufacturing floors. Its logic spread into food production, logistics, construction, and even administrative work. The principles of standardization, repetition, and optimization became central to modern systems. Processes were broken down, measured, improved, and scaled. Critically, the assembly line introduced the idea that progress could be engineered through structure rather than invention alone. Innovation was no longer limited to new machines. It included new ways of organizing people, time, and movement. Efficiency itself became a technology. Over time, automation reduced the human role in many assembly processes, but the underlying concept remained intact. Even in highly automated environments, products still follow predefined sequences shaped by the same principles first established by assembly line production. The assembly line did not merely accelerate production. It redefined modern civilization's relationship with efficiency, labor, and scale. By transforming how things are made, it transformed how societies function, grow, and sustain themselves. The refrigerator. The refrigerator is one of the most quietly transformative inventions in human history. Unlike dramatic machines or visible symbols of progress, its impact unfolded gradually, embedding itself into daily life until it became indispensable. At its core, refrigeration addressed one of humanity's oldest challenges: the preservation of food. Before artificial cooling, societies relied on seasonal harvesting, drying, salting, smoking, and fermentation to slow decay. These methods extended shelf life but altered taste, nutrition, and availability. Fresh food remained a privilege of time and place. Spoilage was constant, waste was unavoidable, and foodborne illness was a persistent threat. The limits of preservation shaped diets, trade routes, and settlement patterns for centuries. The development of mechanical refrigeration introduced a controlled environment where temperature could be lowered and stabilized regardless of climate or season. By slowing the growth of bacteria and enzymes responsible for decay, refrigeration fundamentally changed the relationship between time and food. What once had to be consumed immediately could now be stored safely for days or weeks. This shift had immediate consequences for public health. Reduced spoilage meant fewer cases of food poisoning and infection. Perishable foods such as meat, dairy, and produce became safer to consume. Nutrition improved as diets expanded beyond what could be locally preserved. The refrigerator did not merely protect food, it protected people. As refrigeration spread beyond ice houses and industrial storage into homes, it reshaped domestic life. Shopping habits changed from daily procurement to planned storage. Meals became less dependent on immediate availability and more structured around convenience and preference. The kitchen evolved into a center of long-term food management rather than short-term preparation. The impact extended into cities and global supply systems. Refrigerated transport allowed food to travel vast distances without loss. Agricultural regions were no longer limited to feeding nearby populations. Fish, meat, fruits, and vegetables could cross continents, connecting producers and consumers across the world. This transformation laid the groundwork for modern global food distribution. Refrigeration also altered labor and industry. Food production shifted toward large-scale processing and storage facilities. Supermarkets replaced local markets, offering year-round access to seasonal goods. Consistency and reliability became defining features of food economies. Beyond food, refrigeration influenced medicine and science. Vaccines, blood supplies, and pharmaceuticals required stable cold storage to remain effective. Hospitals and laboratories depended on refrigeration to preserve samples, prevent contamination, and ensure treatment reliability. Modern healthcare systems could not function without controlled cooling. The refrigerator also contributed to changes in social rhythms. Preservation reduced the urgency of daily survival tasks, freeing time for work, education, and leisure. Households became less vulnerable to supply disruptions. Food security improved, particularly in urban environments where storage space was limited. Over time, technological refinements improved efficiency, reduced size, and expanded accessibility. What began as industrial machinery evolved into compact domestic appliances. Refrigeration became a silent infrastructure, operating continuously in the background of modern life. The refrigerator's significance lies not in spectacle, but in stability. It created predictability in a world once governed by decay. By slowing the natural processes of deterioration, it extended control over time itself. This quiet mastery reshaped health, commerce, and daily existence. The refrigerator did not simply preserve food. It preserved possibility, continuity, and modern living as we know it. The washing machine. The washing machine stands as one of the most socially transformative inventions of the modern era, not because of its technological complexity, but because of the labor it removed from everyday life. For most of human history, washing clothes was among the most physically demanding and time-consuming domestic tasks. It required hours of repetitive motion, heavy lifting, exposure to cold water, and constant attention. Clean clothing was not a matter of convenience, but of endurance. Before mechanization, laundering involved hauling water, heating it manually, scrubbing fabric against rough surfaces, wringing garments by hand, and waiting for long drying times. This process was repeated weekly, sometimes daily, depending on climate and living conditions. The task shaped household routines and dictated the rhythm of domestic life. Cleanliness came at a significant physical cost. The introduction of mechanical washing began as a gradual process. Early machines focused on agitation rather than automation, replacing manual scrubbing with rotating drums or paddles. Even in these early forms, the reduction in effort was substantial. Human strength was replaced by mechanical motion, and time previously spent on washing could be redirected elsewhere. As designs evolved, washing machines integrated water control, rotation cycles, and eventually electric motors. This progression transformed laundering from a full-day ordeal into a predictable, contained process. The machine assumed responsibility for consistency, pressure, and repetition, removing variability and fatigue from the task. The social consequences were profound. By drastically reducing the time required for laundry, the washing machine altered how households organized their days. Tasks that once consumed entire mornings or afternoons became background processes. This shift expanded the usable hours of daily life, enabling greater participation in education, paid work, and social activities. The washing machine also contributed to rising standards of hygiene. Clean clothes became more frequent and accessible, reducing the spread of disease and parasites. Uniform cleanliness became an expectation rather than an exception, influencing public health and social norms. In urban environments, the washing machine changed spatial organization. Dedicated wash areas replaced communal facilities. Apartment living became more practical, and household independence increased. The machine brought industrial efficiency into private space, merging domestic life with mechanical reliability. Economically, the washing machine reshaped labor distribution. Services once outsourced to laundries or domestic workers shifted into the home. This transition altered service industries and redefined household self-sufficiency. At the same time, appliance manufacturing created new industrial sectors focused on durability, standardization, and mass production. The washing machine also influenced clothing itself. Fabrics and designs adapted to mechanical cleaning. Durability, color fastness, and material resilience became priorities. Fashion evolved alongside technology, shaped by the realities of machine care. Over time, automation increased further. Timers, program cycles, and water efficiency reduced human involvement to simple input and removal. The act of washing became passive, requiring minimal attention while delivering consistent results. The significance of the washing machine lies in what it removed rather than what it added. By eliminating hours of physical labor, it returned time and energy to millions of people across generations. This redistribution of effort quietly restructured daily life, labor expectations, and social participation. The washing machine did not change history through speed or scale, but through relief. It lifted a burden that had weighed on households for centuries, and in doing so, it reshaped modern life at its most fundamental level. The elevator. The elevator is an invention that fundamentally altered the shape of human civilization by changing how space itself could be used. For most of history, vertical movement was a physical limitation that shaped architecture, population density, and social hierarchy. Buildings rarely rose beyond a few stories because stairs imposed a strict boundary on practicality. Height was a burden, not an advantage. Before mechanical elevators, upper floors were undesirable. They required effort to reach and limited the movement of people, goods, and materials. In cities, the most valuable spaces were closest to the ground, while higher levels were reserved for storage or the least privileged residents. Urban growth spread outward rather than upward, constrained by human endurance. The introduction of powered vertical transportation reversed this logic. By enabling people and cargo to move vertically with minimal effort, the elevator removed gravity as a governing force in architectural design. Height became accessible, predictable, and efficient. Buildings were no longer defined by how high people could climb, but by how high structures could be engineered. Early elevator systems focused on lifting heavy loads rather than passengers. Their adaptation for human transport required reliability and safety. The development of secure braking mechanisms transformed elevators from dangerous machines into trusted infrastructure. Once vertical movement became safe, consistent, and routine, public perception shifted rapidly. The consequences for cities were immediate. Buildings grew taller, land use intensified, and population density increased without expanding urban footprints. The skyline emerged as a defining feature of modern cities. Vertical space became economically valuable, and architecture responded with new forms and proportions. The elevator also restructured social organization within buildings. Upper floors transformed from undesirable spaces into premium locations. Views, light, and isolation from street noise became assets rather than inconveniences. Economic value migrated upward, reshaping real estate markets and urban planning. Commercial buildings depended heavily on vertical transport. Offices, hotels, and residential towers required constant, efficient circulation of people. The elevator became a silent coordinator of daily movement, shaping schedules, crowd flow, and building design. Without it, large-scale vertical workplaces would be impossible. Beyond architecture, the elevator altered how people perceived distance. Vertical travel became psychologically compressed. Moving dozens of floors required little effort and minimal time, changing spatial awareness. Height ceased to feel remote, becoming integrated into everyday routines. Technological refinements improved speed, control, and efficiency. Systems evolved to handle increasing traffic, balancing load distribution and minimizing waiting times. Elevators became synchronized networks rather than isolated machines, responding dynamically to human movement patterns. The elevator also influenced emergency planning, construction methods, and material transport. High-rise construction depended on vertical logistics long before buildings were occupied. Steel, concrete, and glass moved upward as easily as people, enabling faster and more ambitious projects. As cities grew denser, the elevator allowed vertical coexistence of thousands of individuals within a single structure. Residential life, work, commerce, and services stacked within shared space, redefining urban living. Communities formed not across streets, but across floors. The elevator's impact lies in its invisibility. It does not dominate attention, yet it governs the structure of modern cities. It made vertical civilization possible, transforming gravity from a constraint into a design parameter. The elevator did not merely lift people upward. It lifted cities themselves, redefining how humanity occupies space in the modern world. The internal combustion engine. The internal combustion engine is one of the most decisive inventions in the history of modern civilization, not because it introduced motion, but because it concentrated power into a compact, controllable form. Before its emergence, mechanical energy depended largely on external sources such as wind, water, or steam. These systems were effective but limited by location, scale, and infrastructure. Power generation required fixed environments, and movement remained constrained by distance and dependency. The internal combustion engine changed this relationship entirely. By igniting fuel within a confined chamber, it transformed chemical energy directly into mechanical motion. This process produced high power relative to size and weight, making engines portable, adaptable, and independent. Energy no longer needed to be generated in one place and transmitted elsewhere. Could travel with the machine itself. Early development focused on reliability, ignition control, and fuel efficiency. Incremental refinements improved compression, timing, and cooling. Over time, the engine became stable enough to operate continuously, predictable enough to support large-scale adoption, and flexible enough to be adapted to multiple uses. The consequences of this transformation were vast. Mobility expanded rapidly as engines were integrated into vehicles capable of operating on varied terrain and over long distances. Movement became faster, more frequent, and less dependent on external networks. Travel ceased to be an exception and became routine. Industrial production also changed. Machines powered by internal combustion engines could operate outside centralized facilities. Work moved closer to raw materials, construction sites, and remote locations. Industries gained autonomy from fixed power grids, accelerating expansion and diversification. The engine reshaped economic structures by enabling decentralized productivity. Goods could be produced, transported, and distributed with unprecedented speed. Markets expanded geographically, and supply chains became more dynamic. Distance lost its limiting power over trade and coordination. Urban environments evolved alongside engine-driven mobility. Cities expanded outward as commuting became feasible. Suburbs emerged as functional extensions of urban centers. Infrastructure adapted to accommodate vehicles, reshaping landscapes and redefining daily routines. The internal combustion engine also influenced warfare, agriculture, and logistics. Mechanized transport replaced animal labor, increasing speed and capacity. Human effort shifted from physical exertion to control and coordination. Energy became a managed resource rather than a limiting factor. As adoption grew, standardization followed. Engine components, fuels, and maintenance practices became consistent, supporting mass production and global distribution. This uniformity reinforced reliability and lowered barriers to access. Over time, efficiency improvements reduced fuel consumption and increased longevity. Engines became more durable, quieter, and more responsive. Their presence integrated seamlessly into machines that defined modern life. The internal combustion engine did not simply make machines move. It redefined movement itself. By placing power at the point of action, it dissolved spatial constraints and reshaped how societies organized work, travel, and growth. Its legacy lies in mobility without dependence, power without proximity, and motion without fixed boundaries. Through this engine, modern civilization learned to carry energy with it wherever it went. The credit card. The credit card represents a fundamental shift in how value is exchanged, recorded, and trusted within modern society. For centuries, economic transactions relied on physical representations of value: coins, banknotes, and later checks. These systems required immediate settlement and physical presence. Money had to change hands for an exchange to be considered complete. The introduction of the credit card disrupted this direct relationship between purchase and payment. Instead of transferring money at the moment of transaction, the card introduced a delay, supported by institutional trust. Value could be accessed instantly, while settlement occurred later through an abstract financial system operating in the background. Early forms of credit existed long before cards, but they were personal, localized, and limited. Credit cards standardized and scaled this concept. A single instrument could be accepted across multiple locations, merchants, and regions. Trust shifted from individual relationships to centralized systems backed by financial institutions. This change accelerated the pace of commerce. Transactions became faster and more convenient, removing friction from everyday exchanges. The act of purchasing was reduced to a simple authorization, while complex accounting processes were handled invisibly. Consumption became detached from the physical handling of money. The credit card also reshaped consumer behavior. By separating spending from immediate payment, it altered how people perceived cost and affordability. Purchases no longer required the visible depletion of cash, changing psychological boundaries around spending. Financial decisions became less tangible and more abstract. On a systemic level, credit cards enabled the expansion of consumer economies. Retail environments adapted to accommodate rapid, high-volume transactions. Businesses benefited from reduced handling of cash and increased purchasing capacity among customers. Economic activity became more fluid and continuous. The infrastructure supporting credit cards introduced new layers of verification and security. Authorization networks, transaction records, and fraud detection systems transformed financial oversight. Every purchase became data, recorded and traceable, contributing to increasingly detailed economic mapping. The credit card also facilitated globalization. Travelers could access purchasing power without carrying large sums of cash or navigating currency exchanges. Commerce extended beyond national borders, supported by unified payment systems. International trade and tourism became more accessible and reliable. Over time, credit cards evolved beyond simple payment tools. They became identifiers, access keys, and financial profiles. Spending patterns informed risk assessment, creditworthiness, and economic forecasting. Individual behavior became integrated into large-scale financial analytics. The rise of digital commerce further amplified the importance of credit cards. Online transactions depended on remote verification rather than physical exchange. The card became a bridge between virtual marketplaces and real-world financial systems. Despite its simplicity, the credit card introduced a profound abstraction. Money became less visible, less tactile, and more symbolic. Economic participation no longer required physical currency, only authorization within a trusted system. The credit card did not change what money was, but it changed how money was experienced. It transformed exchange into a process of permission rather than possession. Through this shift, modern economies gained speed, scale, and complexity. The legacy of the credit card lies in its quiet normalization of deferred value. It taught societies to operate on trust, systems, and promises encoded in infrastructure rather than objects. In doing so, it redefined the mechanics of everyday economic life. The barcode. The barcode is one of the most understated yet structurally important inventions of the modern world. Unlike machines that transform physical labor or devices that capture attention, the barcode operates quietly, embedded within systems that manage movement, storage, and exchange. This power lies not in visibility, but in standardization. Before the barcode, tracking goods was a manual and error-prone process. Identification relied on written labels, memory, and human interpretation. As commerce expanded, this system struggled under the weight of growing volume and complexity. Errors multiplied, inventories became unreliable, and speed was limited by human processing capacity. The barcode introduced a machine-readable identity for objects. By encoding information into a pattern that could be instantly interpreted by scanners, it eliminated ambiguity. Each product became uniquely identifiable within a shared system of reference. Objects gained digital identities without changing their physical form. This transformation allowed information to move faster than goods themselves. When a barcode was scanned, data traveled instantly through databases, updating inventories, triggering orders, and recording transactions. Physical movement became synchronized with informational movement, creating a continuous flow between reality and record. Retail environments were among the first to experience the impact. Checkout processes accelerated dramatically. Prices became consistent, accounting became automated, and transaction accuracy improved. The simple act of scanning replaced manual entry, reducing labor and minimizing error. Beyond retail, the barcode reshaped logistics. Warehouses adopted automated tracking systems, enabling precise control over storage and distribution. Goods could be located, counted, and moved with unprecedented efficiency. Large-scale supply chains became manageable only because objects could be identified instantly at every stage. The barcode also standardized communication across industries. Manufacturers, distributors, and retailers operated within a shared language of identification. This interoperability removed friction between systems and organizations. Commerce scaled not just through transportation, but through coordination. As adoption spread, the barcode became a foundational layer of globalization. Products crossed borders with consistent identification, enabling seamless customs processing, inventory management, and distribution. International trade depended increasingly on the ability to track goods reliably across vast distances. The influence of the barcode extended into healthcare, manufacturing, and administration. Medical supplies, equipment, and records benefited from precise tracking. Errors decreased as identification became automated. Systems gained reliability through consistency rather than oversight. Importantly, the barcode shifted labor from interpretation to supervision. Human roles moved from reading and recording to monitoring and managing systems. Efficiency increased not through speed alone, but through reduction of cognitive load and error. Over time, barcodes evolved in form, but their principle remained constant. A simple visual pattern enabled machines to see, identify, and respond. This capability transformed physical objects into data points within larger systems of control and optimization. The barcode did not change what goods were. It changed how goods were known. By giving objects a standardized, machine-readable identity, it allowed modern economies to operate at scale without losing accuracy. Its legacy is one of invisible order. The barcode created structure within complexity, turning chaos into traceable flow. Through this quiet invention, the modern world learned to see, count, and manage itself with precision. The GPS. The Global Positioning System represents a transformation in how humanity understands location, movement, and space itself. For most of history, navigation relied on landmarks, maps, and human interpretation of the environment. Position was estimated through observation and experience, and uncertainty was an accepted part of travel. Distance and direction were never fully precise. The GPS introduced a system in which location could be calculated continuously and accurately anywhere on the planet. By using synchronized signals and precise timing, it allowed receivers to determine their position in relation to fixed reference points in space. Location became measurable, repeatable, and independent of local conditions. This shift redefined navigation. Movement no longer required constant interpretation of surroundings. Routes could be planned with accuracy, and progress could be monitored in real time. Travel became more predictable, reducing uncertainty and error. The availability of precise positioning changed transportation systems fundamentally. Vehicles could follow optimized paths, schedules became more reliable, and coordination improved. Navigation ceased to be a skill reserved for specialists and became a built-in function of everyday movement. The GPS also altered how space was conceptualized. The world became a grid of coordinates rather than a collection of relative directions. Locations gained numerical identities that could be shared, stored, and analyzed. Space itself became data. As adoption expanded, GPS became embedded in infrastructure. Mapping systems evolved from static representations into dynamic, responsive tools. Routes adapted in real time, reflecting conditions rather than assumptions. Movement became informed rather than reactive. The influence of GPS extended into logistics and planning. Goods could be tracked continuously, improving efficiency and accountability. Time and location synchronized across systems, allowing complex operations to function with precision. On an individual level, GPS reshaped daily behavior. Navigation decisions required less cognitive effort. The need to memorize routes diminished, replaced by reliance on continuous guidance. Spatial awareness shifted from internal mapping to external systems. The system also enabled new standards of accuracy in measurement. Surveying, construction, and coordination relied on consistent positioning. Errors decreased as reference points remained stable and universal. As GPS integrated into mobile devices, it became a constant presence. Location awareness transformed services, coordination, and communication. Movement patterns became visible, analyzable, and predictable within larger systems. The GPS did not eliminate distance, but it reduced uncertainty. By making location continuously known, it reshaped how people move through the world and how systems respond to that movement. The significance lies in precision without effort. The GPS embedded spatial certainty into everyday life, transforming navigation from interpretation into calculation. Through this system, the modern world learned to locate itself with confidence. The air conditioner. The air conditioner is an invention that reshaped human settlement and productivity by altering the relationship between climate and daily life. For most of history, temperature dictated where people could live, work, and concentrate for extended periods. Heat was not merely discomfort, it was a limiting factor that influenced architecture, labor capacity, and population density. Before mechanical cooling, adaptation to heat relied on passive methods. Buildings were designed to manage airflow, shade, and insulation. Work schedules followed natural rhythms, slowing during the hottest hours. These strategies reduced exposure but did not eliminate the physiological strain imposed by high temperatures. The development of air conditioning introduced active climate control. By regulating temperature and humidity within enclosed spaces, it created stable indoor environments independent of external conditions. Heat became manageable rather than dominant. Human activity could continue uninterrupted, regardless of season or geography. This shift had immediate effects on productivity. Concentration, precision, and endurance improved in controlled environments. Offices, factories, and institutions could operate consistently throughout the year. Climate ceased to determine the pace of work, allowing schedules to become standardized. Architecture adapted rapidly. Buildings no longer depended solely on natural ventilation. Enclosed designs became feasible, enabling larger structures, sealed windows, and new materials. Urban density increased as interior comfort became predictable and scalable. The air conditioner also reshaped demographic patterns. Regions once limited by extreme heat experienced rapid growth. Populations expanded into areas previously considered marginal for large-scale settlement. Economic activity followed climate control, reshaping regional development. In domestic spaces, air conditioning altered daily routines. Sleep quality improved, indoor activities increased, and seasonal migration diminished. Homes became year-round environments rather than temporary shelters from climate extremes. Public health benefited indirectly. Controlled humidity reduced mold and heat-related stress. Indoor environments became safer and more consistent, particularly for vulnerable populations. Climate-related fatigue and illness decreased as exposure lessened. The presence of air conditioning also changed social expectations. Thermal comfort became a baseline standard rather than a luxury. Buildings, workplaces, and vehicles were designed with climate control assumed rather than optional. As systems became more efficient and widespread, air conditioning integrated into infrastructure. Power consumption patterns shifted, and energy management adapted to support continuous cooling demands. Climate control became a permanent component of modern systems. The air conditioner's influence extended beyond comfort. It reshaped how time, labor, and space were organized. By neutralizing heat as a limiting factor, it expanded the functional boundaries of civilization. The air conditioner did not change the climate itself. It changed humanity's ability to exist independently of it. Through controlled environments, modern life gained stability, consistency, and resilience in the face of natural extremes. The antibiotic mass production. The mass production of antibiotics marked a decisive turning point in human survival, not through discovery alone, but through scale and reliability. Long before antibiotics could be produced in large quantities, infections were among the leading causes of death. Minor wounds, routine surgeries, and common illnesses carried unpredictable and often fatal outcomes. Medical knowledge existed, but effective treatment was limited by availability. The challenge was not simply identifying antibacterial substances, but producing them consistently, safely, and in sufficient quantities. Early antibiotic use depended on scarce laboratory methods that could not support widespread medical needs. Treatment remained exceptional rather than standard. Mass production transformed antibiotics from experimental substances into dependable tools of medicine. Standardized processes ensured consistent potency, purity, and dosage. What had once been uncertain became measurable and controllable. Medicine gained a weapon that could be deployed reliably across populations. This shift redefined clinical practice. Infections that previously required isolation, prolonged recovery, or acceptance of risk became treatable conditions. Mortality rates dropped sharply as physicians gained confidence in intervention rather than observation. Treatment became proactive rather than reactive. Hospitals changed structurally. Surgical procedures expanded in scope and frequency as infection risk decreased. Recovery times shortened, and outcomes improved. Medicine moved from cautious limitation toward controlled intervention, supported by reliable antimicrobial protection. Public health systems benefited profoundly. Widespread access to antibiotics reduced the spread of contagious diseases. Outbreaks became manageable, and preventative care gained effectiveness. The collective vulnerability of populations diminished. Mass production also standardized medical response. Treatment protocols became uniform, enabling consistent care across regions. Healthcare systems gained scalability, allowing medical services to expand without proportional increases in risk. Beyond hospitals, antibiotics influenced everyday life. Survival rates increased, childhood mortality declined, and life expectancy rose. Infections ceased to define the boundaries of human lifespan. The uncertainty that once accompanied illness receded into the background of daily existence. The psychological impact was equally significant. Confidence in medical intervention changed how societies perceived disease. Illness became a challenge to be treated rather than an inevitability to be endured. Trust in healthcare institutions strengthened as outcomes improved. The infrastructure supporting antibiotic production reinforced industrial medicine. Quality control, distribution networks, and regulatory standards became integral to healthcare systems. Medicine evolved into a coordinated, large-scale enterprise. The mass production of antibiotics did not eliminate disease, but it altered the balance between humans and microorganisms. Control replaced vulnerability, and predictability replaced fear. Through scale and standardization, medicine gained the ability to protect populations rather than individuals alone. The true impact of antibiotic mass production lies in its transformation of survival from chance to system. By making treatment reliable and accessible, it redefined what it meant to be sick in the modern world. The battery. The battery is one of the most enabling inventions of modern civilization, not because it produces energy, but because it stores it. For most of human history, power existed only at the moment it was generated. Energy had to be used immediately or it was lost. This limitation shaped technology, labor, and daily life. Activity followed availability, and continuity was fragile. The battery introduced a fundamental change by separating energy generation from energy use. Chemical reactions could now capture electrical potential and preserve it for later release. Power became portable, controllable, and independent of time and place. Energy could wait. Early batteries demonstrated a new principle rather than immediate practicality. They showed that electricity could be stored, transported, and delivered on demand. This idea alone expanded the horizon of technological possibility. Devices no longer needed to be tethered to a constant source of power. As battery technology developed, reliability and capacity improved. Energy storage became predictable. Output could be regulated, repeated, and integrated into systems. Electricity ceased to be fleeting and became dependable. The consequences of this shift were profound. Portable tools emerged that could function away from centralized infrastructure. Communication, measurement, and control devices gained mobility. Technology moved out of fixed locations and into the hands of individuals. The battery also altered the structure of electrical systems. Power grids could stabilize fluctuations through stored energy. Devices could operate smoothly despite interruptions. Continuity replaced vulnerability, and reliability became a design expectation rather than a fortunate condition. In daily life, batteries reshaped routine behavior. Devices no longer depended on proximity to outlets or generators. Movement and function became flexible. The boundary between active and inactive states blurred as power became embedded within objects themselves. Industrially, batteries enabled autonomy. Machines could operate in remote environments. Tools could be deployed where infrastructure was absent or impractical. Energy storage allowed work to occur independently of location. As batteries became smaller and more efficient, they disappeared into design. Power storage became invisible, integrated seamlessly into objects. Technology appeared autonomous, responsive, and always available. The evolution of battery chemistry increased energy density and longevity. Devices grew lighter while becoming more capable. Storage time expanded and reusability improved. Power management shifted from constant supply to planned consumption. The battery also introduced a new relationship with energy awareness. Charge levels, consumption rates, and efficiency became part of everyday thinking. Energy became something managed rather than merely consumed. On a systemic level, batteries supported resilience. Backup power systems protected critical infrastructure. Emergency continuity became possible. Stability extended beyond normal conditions into moments of disruption. The battery did not create electricity, nor did it define its use. It made electricity practical, mobile, and reliable. By allowing energy to be stored and released at will, it transformed electricity from a phenomenon into an everyday utility. The true significance of the battery lies in its quiet persistence. It operates in silence, without motion or spectacle, yet underpins modern autonomy. Through stored energy, modern life gained flexibility, continuity, and independence from immediacy. The battery turned power into potential, and through that potential, it reshaped how civilization functions, moves, and endures. The Internet Search Engine. The Internet Search Engine represents a decisive transformation in how knowledge is accessed, organized, and utilized in the modern world. Before its emergence, information on the Internet existed as a vast but fragmented collection of isolated sources. Access depended on prior knowledge of where information was located. Discovery was limited by navigation rather than availability. The search engine introduced structure to digital chaos. By systematically indexing content and making it retrievable through standardized queries, it transformed the internet from a passive archive into an active information system. Knowledge became searchable rather than merely stored. This change fundamentally altered the relationship between individuals and information. Access no longer required expertise in source location or institutional affiliation. Information could be retrieved instantly, reducing barriers that had historically separated specialists from the general public. Search engines also introduced relevance as a measurable concept. Results were ranked, filtered, and ordered according to algorithms rather than chronology or authority alone. Information gained visibility through connection and context rather than proximity. The pace of learning accelerated. Research tasks that once required hours of manual searching could be completed in minutes. Decision-making became informed by immediate access to diverse perspectives and data points. Knowledge shifted from accumulation to retrieval. The presence of search engines reshaped education. Memorization lost prominence as the ability to locate and evaluate information gained importance. Learning became less about storage of facts and more about navigation through information landscapes. On a societal level, search engines influenced how truth and consensus formed. Widely accessed results shaped shared understanding. Visibility became a factor in perceived importance, and information hierarchy emerged from algorithmic organization. The economic impact was equally significant. Businesses adapted to a world where discoverability determined relevance. Information visibility influenced success, and digital presence became a strategic priority. Markets responded to searchability as much as to product quality. Search engines also transformed everyday behavior. Curiosity could be satisfied immediately. Uncertainty decreased as answers became accessible. Knowledge became woven into routine decisions, from planning to problem-solving. As search technology evolved, it integrated context, language, and intent. Queries became less rigid, accommodating natural expression. Interaction with information became conversational rather than procedural. The constant availability of search reshaped cognition. Memory adapted, favoring recognition over retention. Knowing how to find information became as valuable as knowing the information itself. The search engine did not create knowledge, but it redefined access to it. By organizing the digital world into retrievable structures, it made information operational. Knowledge became actionable in real time. The enduring impact of the Internet search engine lies in its transformation of information from static content into a living system. Through search, the Internet became usable at scale, and knowledge became a dynamic resource integrated into everyday life. The social network. The social network represents a structural shift in how human connection is formed, maintained, and observed in the digital age. For most of history, social interaction depended on physical proximity, shared schedules, and limited communication channels. Relationships unfolded within constrained spaces and times. Visibility was local and influence traveled slowly. The emergence of digital social networks removed these constraints by creating persistent, networked spaces where interaction could occur continuously. Connection no longer depended on presence. Communication became asynchronous, scalable, and detached from geography. Social interaction transformed from an event into an ongoing state. This transformation altered the nature of identity. Individuals gained the ability to present themselves through curated profiles, visible histories, and recorded interactions. Social presence became persistent rather than momentary. Identity extended beyond physical encounters into continuously updated digital representations. Social networks also changed the mechanics of communication. Messages, reactions, and shared content compressed expression into rapid, repeatable actions. Interaction frequency increased while effort decreased. Communication became constant, woven into daily routines. The visibility of social interaction introduced a new layer of social awareness. Relationships were no longer private exchanges alone but observable patterns. Attention became quantifiable through metrics, transforming visibility into influence. Social validation gained numerical expression. Information spread differently within these networks. Content traveled through connections rather than institutions. Distribution became decentralized, shaped by engagement rather than authority. Social networks functioned as amplifiers, accelerating the movement of ideas across populations. The structure of communities evolved accordingly. Groups formed around shared interests rather than physical location. Membership became fluid, overlapping, and dynamic. Social boundaries softened as networks expanded and recombined. Social networks also reshaped time perception. Interaction no longer followed clear beginnings or endings. Conversations persisted indefinitely, reappearing through notifications and reminders. The present became continuous, with past interactions remaining accessible. Economically, social networks altered visibility and reach. Influence could emerge from connectivity rather than position. Communication scaled without proportional cost. Networks became platforms where attention itself carried value. On an individual level, social networks normalized constant awareness of others. Social comparison became ambient rather than occasional. Interaction became integrated into idle moments, filling previously empty time. The integration of social networks into everyday devices made connection ubiquitous. Social presence traveled with individuals, embedded in routine actions. Interaction became ambient, always available but rarely isolated. The social network did not invent communication. It reorganized it. By making interaction persistent, visible, and scalable, it altered how relationships form and how societies coordinate. Its lasting impact lies in the transformation of social space into a digital environment. Through networks, human connection became continuous infrastructure rather than episodic exchange. This shift redefined social life for the modern world. The container shipping system. The container shipping system represents one of the most consequential transformations in global trade, not through speed alone, but through standardization. Before its introduction, the movement of goods across long distances was slow, labor-intensive, and fragmented. Cargo was handled piece by piece, loaded and unloaded manually, and exposed to damage, theft, and delay at every transfer point. This method imposed natural limits on trade. Transportation costs remained high, transit times were unpredictable, and coordination between ships, trains, and trucks required extensive human labor. The flow of goods was constrained not by distance, but by handling. The container shipping system introduced a simple yet powerful idea. Goods could be packed once into standardized containers and remain sealed throughout their journey. These containers could move seamlessly between ships, rail cars, and trucks without repacking. The unit of transport shifted from individual items to uniform modules. Standardization transformed logistics into a system. Ports adapted to handle containers mechanically rather than manually. Cranes replaced labor crews, and loading times dropped dramatically. What once took days could be completed in hours. Efficiency became structural rather than incremental. The reliability of containerized transport reshaped planning. Schedules stabilized, losses decreased, and delays became exceptions rather than expectations. Supply chains could be designed with precision, enabling just-in-time delivery and large-scale coordination. Economically, container shipping reduced costs to an unprecedented degree. Lower transportation expenses expanded markets and encouraged specialization. Producers could reach distant consumers without prohibitive risk. Trade ceased to be regional and became truly global. The physical geography of trade also changed. Ports evolved into highly specialized hubs, connected by standardized infrastructure. Inland distribution centers emerged, extending the reach of maritime transport deep into continents. The flow of goods became continuous rather than segmented. Containerization altered labor patterns. Manual cargo handling declined, replaced by technical operation and logistics management. Productivity increased, and scale became the defining feature of transport efficiency. Industries adapted rapidly. Manufacturing, retail, and agriculture reorganized around predictable delivery. Inventory strategies shifted from storage to movement. Goods were no longer held for uncertainty. They flowed according to schedules. The container shipping system also enabled global interdependence. Products assembled from components sourced across multiple regions became viable. Supply chains spanned continents, linking economies into integrated networks. The system's influence extended beyond commerce. Infrastructure investment followed trade routes. Urban development adapted to logistics hubs. Economic growth aligned with connectivity rather than proximity. The container itself became a universal symbol of movement. Its dimensions defined ship design, port architecture, and transport equipment. A single standard reshaped an entire industry. The container shipping system did not invent trade, but it removed its friction. By making transport predictable, secure, and scalable, it enabled globalization to function as a system rather than an aspiration. Its legacy lies in invisibility. Goods arrive reliably without revealing the complex choreography behind them. Through standardized containers, the world learned to move at scale. The cloud computing. Cloud computing represents a structural transformation in how computation is accessed, distributed, and sustained. Before its emergence, digital capability was tied directly to physical ownership. Organizations and individuals depended on local machines, on-site servers, and fixed infrastructure. Computing power was limited by hardware, maintenance, and physical location. This model imposed clear boundaries. Capacity had to be planned in advance, scaled slowly, and maintained continuously. Excess capacity meant waste, while insufficient capacity meant failure. Digital growth was constrained by physical investment and logistical complexity. Cloud computing introduced a different principle. Instead of owning computational resources, users accessed them remotely as services. Processing power, storage, and networking became abstracted from physical machines. Computing shifted from a product to an on-demand utility. This abstraction transformed reliability. Systems no longer depended on single points of failure. Workloads could be distributed, duplicated, and shifted dynamically. Continuity became structural rather than conditional. Downtime ceased to be an unavoidable risk and became a managed exception. Scalability changed fundamentally. Capacity could expand or contract in response to demand without physical modification. Systems adapted in real time, aligning resources with need. Growth became fluid rather than episodic. Cloud computing also altered the economics of technology. Entry barriers lowered as infrastructure costs transformed into operational usage. Innovation no longer required large initial investment. Digital experimentation became accessible and iterative. From an organizational perspective, cloud infrastructure centralized complexity while decentralizing access. Maintenance, updates, and optimization occurred behind the interface. Users interacted with outcomes rather than mechanisms. Focus shifted from infrastructure management to application and service design. Data management evolved alongside computation. Information became location-independent, accessible from multiple environments. Collaboration became continuous as systems synchronized state across distributed users and devices. Digital workspaces gained persistence and flexibility. The cloud also reshaped software itself. Applications evolved from static installations into continuously updated services. Deployment became constant, incremental, and responsive. Software lifecycles accelerated without disrupting use. Security models adapted to scale. Rather than isolated protection, cloud systems relied on layered control, monitoring, and redundancy. Risk management became systemic, embedded within architecture rather than attached externally. Cloud computing integrated seamlessly with automation. Resources could be allocated, adjusted, and retired without human intervention. Systems became self-regulating, responding to usage patterns and performance metrics. The effect on daily digital life was subtle but pervasive. Services became consistently available across devices. Work, communication, and storage detached from specific machines. Digital continuity followed users rather than hardware. Cloud computing did not invent computation. It reorganized it. By abstracting physical infrastructure into accessible services, It transformed computing from a fixed resource into a flexible environment. The significance lies in invisibility and permanence. The cloud operates continuously, sustaining modern digital existence without demanding attention. Through it, computation became ambient, scalable, and integral to modern civilization. Ending. These inventions didn't just improve individual moments in history, they reshaped how the modern world functions every day. Their impact is so deeply embedded in our lives that it often goes unnoticed. If you found this journey meaningful, support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and leaving a comment. And if you think this story is worth sharing, send it to your friends. Thank you for watching.